In 539 BC, the greatest empire the world had ever seen fell in a single night. No army broke through the gates, no earthquake shook the walls, no plague swept through the streets. The soldiers of Babylon were still at their posts, the feasts were still being held, the wine was still flowing. And then, silence. At its peak, Babylon was the largest city on Earth, a metropolis of 200,000 people, when most cities had fewer than 10,000. Its walls were 80 feet high, and so thick a four-horse chariot could turn around on top of them. Its king had conquered Egypt, destroyed Jerusalem, and enslaved tens of thousands. He built a garden in the middle of a desert, so beautiful that the ancient world called it one of its 7 wonders, and yet it fell before dawn. How does the most powerful empire in ancient history just disappear? And why did the man who conquered it, a Persian king named Cyrus the Great, not burn it to the ground, but walk calmly through its gates and set its people free? Today, we go inside Babylon, the city that invented writing, that rewrote the stars, that gave us laws, mathematics, and time itself. This is the story of the most dangerous empire in ancient history. And the ending will shock you. To understand Babylon, we have to go back, way back, to the very beginning of human civilization. Around 3,500 BC, over 5,000 years ago, in the land between 2 rivers, something happened that had never happened before in human history. People stopped wandering. They settled down. They built cities. This place was called Mesopotamia, from the Greek words for land between the rivers. Today, it's modern Iraq. Back then, it was the cradle of everything. The first great civilization here was Sumer. The Sumerians gave the world something more powerful than any weapon. They invented writing. Not writing as we know it, but wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets, cuneiform, and with writing came records, laws, history, stories. For the first time ever, human beings could speak to the future. The Sumerians built Ur, Uruk, Eridu, the first true cities. They worshipped gods with human emotions. They brewed beer, performed surgery, and studied the night sky with mathematical precision. But Sumer would not last. Around 2334 BC, a man named Sargon of Akkad did something no one had done before. He conquered all of Mesopotamia and united it under one ruler. The world's first empire was born. The Akkadian Empire ruled for nearly 200 years. Then it collapsed, possibly due to a catastrophic drought that lasted over 300 years. Cities were abandoned, people starved. Civilization itself nearly ended. But from the ashes of the Akkadian Empire, something new emerged. A small city on the banks of the Euphrates. A city whose name meant Gateway of the Gods, Babylon. In 1792 BC, a new king took the throne of Babylon. His name was Hammurabi, and he would transform this city from a regional power into the center of the world. Hammurabi was a military genius. Over 40 years, he conquered city after city. Larsa, Eshnunna, Assyria, Mari, until all of Mesopotamia bowed to Babylon. But what made him truly revolutionary wasn't his army. It was a 6-foot-tall stone pillar. Engraved on that pillar were 282 laws. The Code of Hammurabi, the world's first comprehensive legal code. These weren't simple rules. This was a sophisticated legal system covering contracts, wages, property rights, divorce, adoption, trade, and criminal punishment. It assumed that justice, not the whims of a king, should govern society. Some laws sound harsh by modern standards. An eye for an eye. If a builder constructs a house that collapses and kills the owner, the builder is put to death. But others sound surprisingly modern. A wife had the right to divorce her husband. Merchants had to provide receipts. A doctor who botched surgery faced consequences. But here's what most people don't know about Babylon. What Hammurabi's scholars created wasn't just laws. It was the foundations of modern science. Babylonian mathematicians invented algebra. They could calculate the area of irregular shapes, solve quadratic equations, and estimate pi to 4 decimal places over 1,500 years before the ancient Greeks. They created a numerical system based on 60. You use it every single day. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. That's Babylon. That's us, still living by their math 4,000 years later. Babylon's astronomers charted the movements of the sun, moon, and 5 planets visible to the naked eye. They predicted eclipses. They identified and named the constellations we still use today: Orion, Scorpio, Leo, Gemini, the zodiac signs you read in your horoscope. Babylonian. They weren't mystics. They were scientists, working with observation, data, and mathematics 2,000 years before the scientific revolution. But Hammurabi's empire had one weakness. It depended on one man. When Hammurabi died in 1750 BC, his successors struggled to hold it together. New enemies emerged from the north and east, and then came the Hittites. Around 1595 BC, the Hittites swept south from Anatolia, modern Turkey, and sacked Babylon. They took everything they could carry and left. The city survived, but the old Babylonian Empire was finished. For the next 1,000 years, Babylon changed hands again and again. The Kassites ruled for 400 years. The Assyrians conquered it, destroyed it, then rebuilt it. Babylon rose and fell and rose again, like a city that refused to die. Then came the king, who would make Babylon the most terrifying empire the ancient world had ever seen. In 605 BC, a prince named Nebuchadnezzar crushed the combined armies of Egypt and Assyria at the Battle of Carchemish. It was one of the most decisive battles in ancient history. In a single afternoon, Babylon became the dominant power in the known world. Nebuchadnezzar II, to give him his full name, would reign for 43 years, and in that time he would build a city so magnificent that it passed into legend. But he would also commit acts of destruction so devastating they are recorded in 3 different major religions. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon became an engineering marvel. The city covered nearly 2,500 acres, roughly the size of Manhattan. It was surrounded by double walls, a moat, and a massive outer fortification. The main processional road was paved in stone and lined with over 100 lion sculptures. The Ishtar Gate, the northern entrance to the city, was covered in thousands of blue-glazed bricks, decorated with alternating rows of dragons and bulls, sacred animals of the Babylonian gods. Today, it's considered one of the greatest surviving examples of ancient architecture in the world. And then there were the Hanging Gardens. Ancient writers described them as a mountain of green rising from the flat desert plain, terraced gardens climbing 80 feet into the sky, filled with trees, flowers, and waterfalls, kept alive by a system of pumps that lifted water up from the Euphrates. a feat of hydraulic engineering that shouldn't have been possible with the technology of the time. Here's the thing. Archaeologists have never found them. No Babylonian text ever mentions them. Some historians believe the Hanging Gardens weren't in Babylon at all, that they were actually in Nineveh and were misattributed over centuries of retelling. Others think they existed exactly where legend says, but were destroyed so completely that nothing survived. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon may be the greatest mystery in ancient history. They may be the only wonder of the ancient world that we're not even sure existed. But Nebuchadnezzar's reign wasn't just about beauty. It was about power, and power, in the ancient world, was maintained through terror. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar marched on Jerusalem. The kingdom of Judah had stopped paying tribute. He surrounded the city and brought it to its knees. He didn't destroy it the first time. He took hostages instead, members of the royal family, priests, craftsmen, the educated elite, and brought them back to Babylon. This was the beginning of what the Hebrew Bible calls the Babylonian captivity. For the Jewish people, it was a trauma that shaped their entire religious identity. But Judah rebelled. In 587 BC, Nebuchadnezzar returned, and this time he showed no mercy. His army destroyed Jerusalem completely. They burned Solomon's temple, the holiest site in Judaism, built 400 years earlier by King Solomon. They tore down the city walls, slaughtered thousands, and marched the survivors in chains to Babylon. The Book of Psalms records the grief of the Jewish exiles sitting by the rivers of Babylon. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. It is one of the most heartbreaking passages in all of ancient literature, and it happened here, in this city, by this river. Nebuchadnezzar's empire stretched from modern Egypt to modern Iran. He was the most powerful ruler on earth, and by all accounts, he knew it. Ancient sources, including the Book of Daniel, describe a king who was brilliant, ruthless, and increasingly erratic. He reportedly went mad for 7 years, living like an animal in the wilderness before recovering his sanity and returning to rule. Whether that story is literally true or not, it captures something essential about Nebuchadnezzar. Even at the summit of human power, there is something fragile, something that can break. Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BC, and within 23 years of his death, through a succession of assassinations, coups, and weak rulers, Babylon's golden age was over. The stage was set for one of history's most extraordinary nights. October 12th, 539 BC, the city of Babylon is throwing a party. The king, a man named Belshazzar, is hosting a feast for 1,000 of his nobles. They are drinking wine from golden cups looted from the temple in Jerusalem. They are singing, laughing, celebrating the gods of gold and silver. Meanwhile, a Persian army under Cyrus the Great is camped outside the city's walls, but no one in the palace is particularly worried. Babylon's walls are impenetrable. Babylon's granaries are stocked for years. Babylon, as far as Belshazzar is concerned, cannot fall. Then, according to the Book of Daniel, something terrifying happened. A disembodied hand appeared in the firelight and wrote 4 words on the wall: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. The words were in Aramaic. They meant numbered, numbered, weighed, divided. The prophet Daniel was summoned to interpret. His verdict: God had numbered the days of Belshazzar's kingdom. He had been weighed on the scales and found wanting. His empire would be divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, Belshazzar was killed. But how? How did an army breach walls that were considered impenetrable? Cyrus the Great was not just a conqueror. He was a strategist, and he had done something no one expected. The Euphrates River flowed directly through the city of Babylon, entering through a gate in the north wall, passing under the city, and exiting through a gate in the south. It was both the city's greatest resource and its secret vulnerability. Cyrus ordered his engineers to divert the Euphrates. They dug canals upstream, redirecting the flow into marshes and irrigation channels. And as the river level dropped inside the city, the water gates, designed to stop armies, not a drained river, created a passage. Persian soldiers waded through knee-deep water under the city walls and into Babylon. The guards at the water gates, reportedly drunk from the feast, didn't even know what was happening until it was too late. By sunrise, it was over. Babylon, the invincible city, the gateway of the gods, the greatest urban center on earth, had fallen. But here is what makes this conquest unlike almost any other in ancient history. Cyrus didn't sack it. He didn't burn the temples, massacre the people, or enslave the population. Instead, Cyrus issued what historians call the Cyrus Cylinder, a clay tablet that declared the freedom of all peoples under Babylonian captivity. Every enslaved nation, every displaced people, including the Jews. Cyrus allowed the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem. He allowed them to rebuild their temple. The Hebrew Bible calls him the Lord's Anointed, the only non-Jewish king in Scripture to receive that title. The Cyrus Cylinder, now housed in the British Museum, has been called the world's first declaration of human rights. Why? Why would a conqueror show such mercy? Because Cyrus understood something that most rulers never learn. You cannot rule a city that hates you. The fastest way to kill an empire is to rule through fear alone. Cyrus built the Persian Empire on a different principle: tolerance, respect for local customs and religions. And it worked. The Persian Empire would last for 200 years after Babylon's fall. After Cyrus, Babylon passed through the hands of the Persians, then Alexander the Great, who planned to make it the capital of his empire, but died there in 323 BC at just 32 years old, possibly from typhoid fever or poisoning. After Alexander, the city slowly declined. Trade routes shifted. The population drifted away. The Euphrates gradually changed course, and Babylon, this city that had stood for over 2,000 years, was abandoned to the desert. By the time of Christ, it was mostly ruins. By the medieval period, no one even agreed exactly where it had been. But here is the truth about Babylon. It never really died. It lives in everything we are. What Babylon gave the world, the 60-minute hour and the 60-second minute, invented by Babylonian mathematicians, the 7-day week, structured by the Babylonians around the 7 celestial bodies, visible to the naked eye, the Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. The zodiac constellations, Babylonian astronomers mapped and named them: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, all of them. Written law, Hammurabi's Code, established the principle that law should be written, public, and apply equally. That idea is in every legal system on Earth today. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written in Babylon around 2100 BC, it is the oldest work of literature in human history. It contains a flood story, an ark, animals 2 by 2, a dove sent to find land, written 1,000 years before the book of Genesis. Babylon did not just inspire the ancient world. It is the ancient world, everything that came after: Greece, Rome, the Bible, Islam, modern science, modern law. It was all downstream of this city. When we look at the ruins of Babylon today, we don't see a fallen empire. We see a mirror. We see ourselves in our first attempts to understand the stars, to write down our laws, to build something that would last beyond our own lifetimes. The Babylonians called their city the Gateway of the Gods. They believed it was the center of the universe, the place where heaven and earth touched. They weren't wrong, just not in the way they meant. Babylon is still there, beneath the dust, beneath the centuries, beneath the silence, waiting, as it always has, to be remembered. If you made it this far, thank you, genuinely. History like this deserves to be remembered. If this video gave you something, a new perspective, a fact you didn't know, a story that moved you, hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it means everything for this channel. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. We're going deep into the ancient world, the empires that built everything, and the ones that burned it all down. Next week, the Assyrian Empire, the most brutal military machine of the ancient world, the people who made Babylon beg for mercy before Babylon had the last laugh. See you then.